Usually when we talk about history,
Yeah.
there's this expectation of solid ground, like a museum exhibit. You walk in, you look at the artifacts safely behind glass, and the curator just points and says, there it is. That's what happened.
Right. It's a very categorized way of thinking, like binary almost. We prefer our history to just stay contained.
Exactly.
Past tense, clean, totally separated from our day-to-day lives.
But then you step into the dense, dark woods of the Adirondacks. You start looking into the reality of the Underground Railroad in that specific region, and suddenly, that glass case just shatters. We're looking at a historical landscape that absolutely refuses to stay quiet.
Oh, completely. It is the absolute definition of history haunting the present.
It really is.
The legacy of that area is murky, it's incredibly alive, and just deeply atmospheric.
Welcome to today's deep dive. I am so glad you're joining us for this one. Today we're heading deep into the North Country of New York.
Yeah, to look at this fascinating blend of historical accounts and local folklore.
Right, specifically regarding the Underground Railroad in the Adirondacks and those surrounding areas. And the mission here isn't just to tell spooky ghost stories or recount campfire tales,
No, definitely not.
We want to understand what these specific lingering legends actually reveal about the very real, dangerous, and deeply secretive fight for freedom in the decades right before the Civil War. Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can even begin to talk about the echoes left behind in these woods, we have to firmly establish the physical reality of the landscape.
Bro, like what was actually happening out there in the dark?
Exactly.
Well, to understand that, you really have to look at the legal and geographical landscape of the 1850s. Like, after the Fugitive Slave Act was passed in 1850, simply making it to a quote-unquote free state like New York.
It just wasn't enough anymore.
Exactly. Bounty hunters could legally cross state lines, capture escaping individuals, and drag them back south.
Often with the actual mandated help of local authorities, right?
Yeah, it was required by law, so the only true permanent safety was getting all the way across the border into Canada.
Which makes the North Country, places like the Adirondacks and the borderlands around Lake Champlain, this ultimate desperate bottleneck.
Yeah, every route funneling northward eventually had to pass through this intensely rugged terrain.
And just think about the mechanics of moving through that bottleneck.
Oh, it's wild. We are talking about secret routes winding through some of the most unforgiving wilderness in the East.
Facilitated by brave abolitionists acting as guides. This wasn't a casual journey.
Not at all. You didn't just point north and start walking. It involved a highly sophisticated clandestine network of evasion.
I've always been so fascinated by the sheer mechanics of that evasion. Like, how do you coordinate a massive, illegal, human smuggling operation across hundreds of miles?
Right, before cell phones or telegraphs.
Yeah, you can't exactly send an email or a memo.
No, you use the mundane world as your messaging system.
Oh, I love this part.
The mechanisms of secrecy were just woven into everyday life. So like a lantern placed in a specific window pane, rather than just hanging on the porch.
That could communicate whether a house was safe to approach.
Exactly, or if it was being watched. And a quilt hung on a clothesline wasn't just drying.
Right, the pattern itself had a meaning.
Yeah, maybe a log cabin design or a flying geese pattern that served as a literal visual map.
Right.
Or a warning for those who knew how to read it.
That completely reframes the environment for me. Like, I used to think of these mountains as this massive natural lockbox.
A lockbox, yeah.
Like a place where people could just hide inside and be safe.
Yeah.
But it's much more active than that. It's an environmental sieve.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Because the terrain is physically grueling.
Yeah.
Navigating it in pitch blackness, not knowing what's over the next ridge. It'll be incredibly dangerous for the escaping travelers.
Oh, absolutely.
But it was completely neutralizing for the people hunting them.
The environmental sieve concept hits the nail on the head. Because the bounty hunters were heavily armed, right? They had federal backing. They often used tracking dogs.
But they didn't know the local topography.
Right. They couldn't use horses effectively in the deep woods or those rocky, steep ravines.
So the local abolitionist guides basically weaponized the geography.
Yes, exactly. The environment was an adversary to the travelers, causing immense physical suffering, but it acted as this impenetrable shield against their pursuers.
The psychological toll of that must have been staggering. You have the extreme physical exertion of climbing mountains in the dark, dodging ravines, crossing freezing streams.
All combined with the sheer, unending terror of discovery.
Right. Survival in that high-stakes environment.
It required an almost unfathomable level of trust. Imagine the psychological mechanism at play here.
You're putting your life in a stranger's hands.
Your life, your family's lives, your entire future, completely in the hands of a stranger leading you through the pitch black, just based on a quilt hanging on a fence and whispered directions.
It's just incredible.
And that level of prolonged adrenaline, the fear, and that profound reliance on others, it leaves a permanent mark on a place.
It really does. And that intense emotional and physical history didn't just happen in a vacuum, you know?
No, it happened in specific, enduring locations that are still very much on the map today.
Right. Archival records point out a remarkably high concentration of this underground railroad activity around Keysville and Lake Champlain.
Yeah, Keysville in particular was a major hub.
Because of its strong Quaker community, right?
That and its position as an industrial town with a growing free black population. It provided a perfect cover for movement.
Now, what's fascinating here is how these specific regions function today versus their historical reality.
Oh, for sure. When you mention Lake Placid, Lake George, or Lake Champlain to someone today, their mind immediately goes to scenic tourism.
Summer vacations, cabins on the water.
Exactly. But beneath that modern veneer of leisure, these places hold a really heavy, hidden historical weight. Fortunately, preservation efforts like the North Star Underground Railroad Museum in Keysville are doing the vital work of anchoring these stories to the physical geography.
But wait, I have to push back a little on something here.
Okay, go for it.
If the Underground Railroad was supposed to be completely secret, right? Like a matter of life and death, how did we end up with all this widespread local lore?
Ah, I see what you mean.
Doesn't the very existence of local folklore imply that everyone in town actually knew what was going on? If a network is truly a secret, it shouldn't leave a cultural footprint, right?
That is a fantastic point, and it really gets to the heart of how these communities operated back then.
How so?
The secrecy was often what you'd call an open secret among trusted neighbors. Like, if you lived in Keysville in 1855, you probably noticed that the local blacksmith was moving an unusual amount of supplies at 2 in the morning.
Right, or that the Quaker farmer's wagon was heavily tarped heading toward Canada.
Exactly. You knew, but you just didn't speak of it. The folklore we see today largely developed after the Civil War. It emerged as these communities began to retroactively process the massive, silent civil disobedience that had happened right in their own backyards.
So the silence eventually metabolized into storytelling.
Yes, perfectly said.
And because these specific locations absorbed such profound historical trauma and triumph, the folklore that leaked out into the culture is entirely unique.
It really is.
When you look into local archives and oral histories, you find some incredibly evocative reports of the echoes people claim to experience in these woods.
We're talking about shadowy figures moving completely silently through the trees at night.
Phantom lanterns, too.
Yeah, numerous accounts of lights that just appear, hover along the old, overgrown hidden trails, and then vanish into the mist.
And it's not just out in the dense woods either.
No, there are consistent reports of whispers, unexplained footsteps, and the sound of heavy breathing inside the historic homes that once actively served as stations.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Normally, if someone tells you they saw a shadowy figure darting through the woods at midnight, or heard phantom footsteps in a 150-year-old house.
That's a horror story.
Right, that's a campfire tale meant to terrify you. But the historical texts and local interviews make a very clear, crucial distinction here. These reports do not describe scary ghosts.
They absolutely do not. The emotional tenor of these sightings is entirely different from typical ghost lore.
They are consistently perceived as quiet guardians.
Yes, observers describe them as echoes of incredible bravery. They aren't menacing the current residents at all.
They're lingering reminders of shelter, hope, and determination.
Which brings up the psychology of how communities process collective memory. Like, folklore is rarely just a random collection of scary stories.
Right, it has a purpose.
It operates as a mirror, reflecting what a community subconsciously remembers, values, and wants to preserve about its past.
So by framing these spirits not as terrifying monsters or vengeful entities, but as persistent remnants of hope and urgency, the local folklore is honoring the legacy of both the travelers and the guides.
Exactly. It refuses to sensationalize their trauma.
Yeah. If the stories were about screaming ghosts or bloody encounters, it would just reduce the immense bravery of those people to a cheap thrill.
Precisely. Instead, the folklore immortalizes their courage and their focus. It's really a form of profound respect, just disguised as a supernatural encounter.
To truly grasp the comforting nature of these echoes, we have to look at the specific first-hand encounters documented in the historical folklore.
Right, these aren't just vague rumors of spooky woods. The accounts detail very specific, repeating scenarios.
Let's examine the narrative of the old historic farmhouse near the lake.
Okay, yes. This property is widely documented as having served as a prominent station on the Underground Railroad, hiding dozens, perhaps hundreds, of escaping individuals over the years.
The story goes that this old farmhouse is inhabited by a friendly, lingering female spirit. She doesn't rattle chains. She doesn't throw plates against the wall.
No, she seemingly still checks on the travelers.
Yeah, current and past residents report that she is known for making sure the heavy deadbolts on the doors are securely locked at night.
And leaving small, unexplained signs of comfort around the house, like a suddenly smoothed blanket or a relit fire.
Notice the underlying mechanism of those specific actions. Checking the deadbolts. Tending to the warmth of the house.
These are the exact meticulous actions a station master on the Underground Railroad would have had to perform every single night.
And we have to remember the stakes for that station master.
Oh, they were incredibly high. Under the Fugitive Slave Act, harboring an escaping individual meant ruinous fines, confiscation of your property, and up to 6 months in federal prison.
So locking that door wasn't just a bedtime routine.
No, it was a terrifying life-or-death ritual.
Every single night.
The paranoia and the sheer weight of responsibility required to keep those vulnerable people safe would rewire your brain entirely.
So the causality behind this specific haunting isn't malice or unfinished business in the traditional sense.
Right. It's a relentless, looping dedication to safety. The duty to protect was so deeply ingrained in her psychology that the energetic echo of it simply cannot stop.
It makes me think of an analogy. It is exactly like a mother who leaves the porch light on for her kids to come home.
Oh, I like that.
But taken to an eternal extreme, you know. She's a caretaker who is simply unable or maybe unwilling to abandon her post.
The political and legal danger officially passed over a century and a half ago.
Right with the end of the Civil War.
But the trauma and the duty were so intense that the echo just keeps looping. She's keeping the porch light on for travelers who will never stop arriving in her memory.
The tragedy and the beauty of that are just inseparable.
They really are.
And then we have the second specific encounter from the local archives. This one takes us out of the safety of the farmhouse and back outside into the brutal terrain.
Right, this is a first-hand account from a local wilderness guide.
He was out near one of the known old Underground Railroad routes, right at dusk.
And dusk is that perfect transitional time in folklore, often called liminal space.
Right, when things are shifting.
The light is failing, the shadows are lengthening, the woods change shape, which is the exact time when travel on those secret routes would have been ramping up.
Because the travelers would have been waiting in the brush all day.
Yes, waiting for that specific quality of fading light to finally start moving.
So this wilderness guide is out there in that liminal light, and he witnesses what looks like a group of people moving through the trees ahead of him.
But they're moving completely quietly.
And as he watches, straining to see who is out there so late, they simply fade into the mist.
Just disappear.
There is no sound of snapping twigs. They leave absolutely no physical tracks in the mud or the brush.
A literal echo of the past playing out right in front of him.
But the visual element isn't even the most compelling part of that account, is it?
No, it's really not. The account specifically notes that what the guide felt in the wake of this silent group fading away wasn't fear.
It was an overwhelming, lingering feeling of gratitude and urgency.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the emotional residue of that specific encounter is incredibly revealing.
Gratitude and urgency.
Those two words perfectly, flawlessly encapsulate the duality of the Underground Railroad experience.
Let's break that down a bit. Walk me through the mechanics of that specific emotional state. Why those two words together?
Well, think about the psychological reality of someone walking that path. On one hand, you have profound gratitude.
Right. You're immensely thankful for the abolitionist guide who risked everything to meet you.
Thankful for the safe house you just left. Thankful to have survived one more day without being captured and sent back into bondage.
The gratitude is overwhelming.
But that gratitude is inextricably locked together with intense, agonizing urgency.
Because the bounty hunters are still behind you.
Always. You cannot stop to rest. You cannot bask in the relief.
You are desperate to keep moving because the threat is constantly breathing down your neck.
Exactly. You are thankful, but you are terrified. You are relieved, but you are rushing.
The fact that the local folklore preserves those two specific, contradictory emotions, gratitude and urgency, shows how deeply the true historical reality has saturated the environment.
The landscape itself seems to remember the exact emotional frequency of the people who traversed it.
That honestly gives me chills. It bridges the massive gap between a dry historical fact in a textbook and the actual pounding human heart of the people who lived it.
It really grounds the history in reality.
And this duality, this idea of fighting for your life, your basic human dignity in the shadows, it brings us to how we culturally contextualize this history today.
Yes, the historical analysis of this region draws a very strong, deliberate connection between these hidden stories and our national celebrations.
Specifically the 4th of July and Independence Day.
It's a very necessary connection to make, especially when we consider what the concept of independence actually entails.
Because when we typically celebrate Independence Day, the cultural narrative is incredibly loud.
It's very public. We think of brass bands, parades.
Declarations signed by wealthy men in grand, brightly lit rooms.
Exactly. But the core theme of the Underground Railroad in the Adirondacks reminds us of a much harsher alternative truth.
That freedom was not simply down to everyone by a piece of parchment.
Right. For many, it was fought for, inch by painful inch, often in complete and total secrecy.
And at a tremendous personal risk that we can barely comprehend today.
The history of these trails redefines what fighting for independence looks like. It wasn't always on a formalized battlefield with armies in uniform marching to a drumbeat.
Sometimes fighting for independence meant navigating a freezing mountain pass at midnight.
Trusting a stranger with your life, relying on a lantern in a window, and leaving no tracks in the snow.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? I think it directly challenges us to reevaluate our entire understanding of American independence.
It certainly does.
Think about how jarring it is to contrast the way we celebrate today with the reality of those woods. Picture the incredibly loud, bright, booming fireworks lighting up the sky.
And then contrast that with the silent, pitch-black bravery that was required on those mountain paths just to achieve basic human autonomy.
The contrast is staggering.
Yeah.
One is a massive public spectacle of freedom.
And the other was a desperate, invisible fight for the exact same thing.
That is a profound contrast. It teaches us a vital lesson about human rights, I think.
That true freedom often happens in the margins.
Right.
It happens in the shadows, led by quiet people making unimaginably brave choices, long before that freedom is ever recognized, validated, or protected by the state.
The establishment of freedom is almost always a whisper before it is a shout.
That is beautifully put.
And there is a bit of a call to action woven into these historical narratives. Historians and local preservationists suggest that if you are ever visiting these historic areas, especially around Independence Day, you should take a drive to one of the Underground Railroad sites.
Go to Keysville. Get out of your car, walk the actual trail.
The invitation is to actively try to feel the history there, to absorb the silence of the woods.
And maybe, just maybe, sense those quiet guardians who locals believe still watch over the path.
It's an invitation to engage with history, not as a dead artifact behind glass like we talked about earlier, but as an ongoing, living conversation with the landscape.
It requires you to be present with the weight of what happened there.
It really does. To wrap up our journey today, we've traced a path from the very real, secretly coded roots of the pre-Civil War Adirondacks through the brutal physical sieve of the mountains.
All the way to the enduring, protective spirits that locals believe still walk those paths today.
Right. And whether you view these stories as literal ghosts keeping watch, or as the collective cultural echoes of an intense historical trauma, they serve a vital purpose.
They ensure that the staggering courage of these escaping travelers and their guides is never forgotten.
And we owe an immense debt to places like the North Star Museum, the local historians, and the community storytellers who refuse to let these narratives fade.
They prevent the silent history of the marginalized from being overwritten by the loud, comfortable presence.
They are doing the historical equivalent of keeping the porch light on.
Exactly. Keeping the porch light on for history.
And before we go, considering everything we've unpacked today about how the intense emotional weight of the Underground Railroad created these echoes of bravery that people still feel on those trails, it really makes you wonder about the present moment.
In what way?
Well, given the quiet, unseen struggles for freedom and safety that are continually happening in the margins of our modern world.
Right. The people quietly fleeing persecution, the secret networks of aid operating right now.
What invisible trails are being forged today? And what kind of echoes are we leaving behind in the mist for future generations to encounter?
I think we'll leave you to mull that one over.
Until next time, keep looking beyond the glass case.